Hello and welcome to our first live in session with Michael Ayala, Judge Ashley Wilcott. Today we're joined by a very special guest. We are so privileged to have her on the show. Her name is Dr. Debbie Goodman. She's a nationally recognized criminologist. She's also a professor at St. Thomas University. She's an author. She has written a number of books in the true crime space. She has her own true crime podcast called Crime Time with Dr. Debbie. So if you guys get a chance, check that out. We'll get you all that information before Doc leaves us. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us today. It's truly a pleasure to have you on the program.
We love having Debbie on the program. Doctor, I apologize. I'm so informal with it, but I also wanted to share with those who are joining our first ever live chat that I will be monitoring the live chat, Michael. So if anyone wants to jump in and give their questions or thoughts, we'll do our best to answer because we always love hearing from you as we engage in a very thoughtful conversation around mental health.
Yes, absolutely. That's what we're going to be discussing today. And did you want to say something, Doctor?
Oh, yes. I certainly just wanted to thank you both for the honor and privilege of joining your new and exciting podcast. And thank you so much for having me on for what I know will be a very enlightening conversation.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it too. I mean, the reason we wanted to have you on was because, you know, as we watch the Lindsey Clancy case, we all have questions. I mean, I've always said throughout my time at Court TV that I feel like the system struggles with mental health. I'm not sure it knows how to deal with it by 100%. It's getting better. I really like the Massachusetts structure, the way it deals with it in terms of giving the opportunity for these two prongs where, you know, did they know right from wrong, but also were they able to conform their conduct? And I think the Lindsey Clancy case is the case that kind of falls into that aspect of it. For those who might not know, Lindsey Clancy charged with the murder of her 3 children in Massachusetts. She is claiming insanity. She's claiming basically that she had postpartum psychosis and also that she was on this toxic mix of meds that put her in a state that I guess exacerbated it on some level and made this possible. So let's begin by talking about and try to educate folks on postpartum depression. I mentioned earlier, I've had some experience with it. It was a very scary thing. So I want to talk about, there was a statistic that I read as I was getting ready for the show where about 10% of women get postpartum depression, but only 1% go into postpartum psychosis. So let's begin right there. Talk to me about postpartum depression versus psychosis. Is it a continuum? Are they two separate things? Help us understand that aspect.
Certainly, and that's a great place to start. So your statistic is exactly correct, and CDC, our Center for Disease Control, as well as WHO, World Health Organization, provides that data to us. So now the question is, how do we put this on the spectrum? So just like most mental health related circumstances, I view it as mild, moderate, major, both of which classifications, almost as if we would look toward physical health, right? We may know of a friend, a colleague, a family member who may have cancer, who may have heart disease, kidney related issues, diabetes, but not all of the cases are the same, right? Because those two would have to be looked at on an individual basis. So mental health, physical health, I think if we take a look at these 3 categories, that could provide a nice introductory framework for us. Now, specifically with Lindsey Clancy in this case and the postpartum depression versus psychosis. So certainly we dialed back, right? 25 years, the 3 of us remember, and your viewers are certainly well versed on the cases and the crimes, and we look toward Andrea Yates. Now, seemingly, Andrea Yates, just to remind a mother who single-handedly drowned her 5 children in the family bathtub, and apparently she started with postpartum depression after child number 3. With child number 4 and child number 5, her doctor said she did have the postpartum psychosis, wherein she was having the delusions, the hallucinations. She was not or should not have been allowed singularly to be left alone or to care for her children. Now, remember what happened in that case. There was a 1-hour window from 9:30 when husband Rusty left for work until 10:30 when mother-in-law arrived to help her, and it was in that devastating 1 hour period of time that she killed her 5 children. So now here we are, present day. There are similarities, are they not, between the two cases? But the question, Michael, is so intriguing that you ask at the onset about the continuum, meaning if somebody is psychotic, potentially delusional, having hallucinations, does that mean 24/7 for the entirety of a day, the entirety of a week, or beyond? The answer is no. The answer is no. They can interact in what we would call normal behaviors, language, settings, conduct. And even Lindsay Clancy allegedly interacted very well with the children, according to her husband, Patrick. But that 1 hour with this case also is very eerie to me, because recall at 5:30 p.m. to at or near 6:20 p.m. on January 24th, 2023, she sent Patrick out to run errands purposefully, intentionally, so he would not be with her nor the children. And what happened in that 50 to 55-minute window, beyond brutal and barbaric and so horrendous to all of us? Little Cora, 5 years old, little Dawson, 3 years old, and little Callan, 8 months old, were murdered by their mother. So for me as a
Let me
criminologist,
clarify one thing,
yes,
Doc.
please.
You said she sent him out intentionally, purposefully. I just want to be clear. Yes, she sent him out intentionally and purposefully to go get something to eat, go pick up some things for the kids. I'm not, you don't mean she sent him out so she could kill the kids.
Right.
Because that's an
the
issue in
state's
court.
position. That's going to be a
That's an
question
issue
for the
court,
jury.
right?
Yeah.
Right,
I just want to
that's-
clarify.
Yes, thank you for that. I would just say
Okay.
intentionally send him out for these errands, to pick up the food and to pick up medicine for the children.
Can I stop you there, though? I'm sorry to do it, but while you're right at that point, because one of the other things, postpartum, first of all, is very real, very scary. The other part of this that the defense is arguing is the prescription over medication, that she was prescribed up to 12 medications, not that she was taking all of them as prescribed, but how can you rectify, okay, over medication, it caused her to do this. However, in spite of that alleged over medication, she was exactly as you're describing in that 1 hour, going to, telling her husband to go to the store and seemingly acting appropriate to care for the children. I think if it's over medication that's causing a problem, you're not going to be able to be that rational and that specific in these specific things that you're doing for your kids.
Correct, Judge. Correct. And if we take a look at the medication, we know the prescriptions, we know some of the medicines, right? Zoloft, Prozac, Trazodone, Klonopin, Seroquel. Now, our understanding of these types of psychotropic drugs is that they're designed for different purpose, correct? Some of which is for anxiety, others for depression, other for insomnia and mood disorder. So what we know about this is the contraindicators. Could some of these medicines now be more harmful than effective when, as Michael had said, they're in this kind of cocktail approach? But in fairness, right, we don't know exactly, was she taking these medicines with regularity, at the appropriate times, with the appropriate dosages? Who was overseeing even the medicine? And then might we take a step back to suggest a person having to self-medicate and be in charge of their own prescriptions? Would that person be rational? Or is that somebody in a delusional state? See, these are all of the little dots, I think, along the way we will see connected in the courtroom.
Doctor, I honestly think, the defense has to accept and get the jury to accept that she was aware of what she was doing because of a couple of things. The way she was acting before, the way she acted after. We found out yesterday when the doctors arrived on the scene after she jumped out the window, she was asking for a lawyer while she was on the ground. She was aware of what she was doing. the key in Massachusetts, and I've said before, I think it's a better way for dealing with mental health is there's also the opportunity to argue that she could not conform to what was right and wrong. So I think she understood she was doing something wrong, but she could not conform because of these hallucinations, because of this quote unquote male voice that she claimed to be hearing, telling her that this was the time to do this. So talk to me about that. The idea that Patrick Clancy testified, she never mentioned this before. This wasn't something that was prominent in her medical records, but she claimed that that's what happened during this 1 hour period. Is that something that we see in this type of mental illness?
And let me add to that one other fact, and that is she did put that in her diary. So she herself recorded that she was hearing these voices. Go ahead, doctor. Sorry to interrupt.
No. But that too, what you're both saying is very important, because does it speak to reasonableness, rationality, the fact that somebody is lucid enough to put these statements into the diary? But let's also remind that some other statements in the diary, I would think for many of us who are moms and fathers, in fairness, she spoke about being tired, being overwhelmed, being worried about her children's health, even possibly feeling some disconnect along the way to her husband. But does that sound like irrational thinking, or is that something that for those of us who have children and who went through childbirth, would that seemingly be quite normal?
Well, I've
It's
never had
hard
a
to
child, so I'll leave it to you
swallow.
guys.
Right. Thank you, Michael, for not saying, well, right? Because that's what's hard too. I think a lot of people who haven't had children have a lot of natural reactions and opinions about this entire case. And I would suggest postpartum is something that, having had a child, you see or view differently, good, bad, or indifferent. It's just a different knowledge base. But all of this is very hard to swallow. Let's be transparent. And you mentioned, we've looked, all of us, online at the comments, what people are saying, and they're both ends of the spectrum, which is she was sick. This is terrible. This needs to be addressed. And the opposite of this was willful, purposeful, and she absolutely needs to go to jail for the rest of her life. She murdered these children. Such extreme opinions, but it's really hard to swallow. I think that a person can be so deliberate in their actions and have this break and use exercise bands to kill all three of her young children with the exercise bands by strangling them, and then throw herself out of a window. But by the way, she didn't throw herself out. She kind of crawled out and then dropped to allegedly commit suicide. So that leads me to my question about a psychotic break, doctor. Is a psychotic break, can it be 3 minutes in time? Can a person have a psychotic break that's 3 minutes and the before and the after is normal, quote unquote, behaviors? Is that possible?
It's possible, Judge, but it's probably not probable, you see, because this is now going to be so profoundly challenging and disturbing for this jury to look at, the fact pattern. See, if I put the criminologist hat on, then I've got to look at the crimes. We have serious crimes here, which, by the way, I'm always looking at data every single day about what crimes are going up, what's trending, what's going down. And in our last, just to remind the viewers, in a 10-year span, 2016 to 2026, we have seen upticks in what we refer to as familicide. Familicide is when a family member kills a family member. Now we get a little more specific here with this case, and we have two more extremely disturbing crimes, one of which is referred to as filicide, the killing of a child by the parent, hence Cora and Dawson, and then little baby Callan, who is the infant, then that's infanticide. So I know overall the umbrella that the country is speaking about is psychosis, but we still want to be clear about crimes that have occurred in this one circumstance, and there are many.
I think the fact that, so whether we look at this as being some form of psychosis or not, just the fact that a woman would think about killing her children, to me, suggests she's under the influence of some sort of mental health issue, right? It may not rise to the level of psychosis. She may even be lying about the hallucinations, but clearly something was off, even if it's sort of this unnatural extension of OCD, where she was so worried about being able to take care of her children. This is kind of the argument that the prosecution is making. She was so worried about being able to take good care of her children that as she lost the nanny and the dad was working too much, she was worried about being able to take care of them. This is what led her to this act. That even suggests to me some level of mental health issues, although I'm not sure it's enough to get her off of a murder charge, let's say, all three of them.
Or could she just be evil? I'm going to push back on that just a little bit. I would agree with you fundamentally, but I also wonder if a person can just be a bad, evil person to say, I'm going to kill my own kids. That's why we have Debbie.
Thank you, Judge, and thank you, Michael. But if I may, to that point about potentially a caregiver, a mother specifically being evil toward her children, yet not necessarily being psychotic, again, we're all well versed on so many crimes. How about Susan Smith, who killed little Alex and Michael? Was she psychotic? No. Would we call her evil? Yes. What was her motivation? Seemingly to be with a gentleman, right? She was going through a divorce. She was dating somebody or had interest in somebody. And that person basically was honest and said, you know what? I like you, but I'm young. You have two children. I don't necessarily want to be a stepfather yet, and something to that effect. And she killed her two children. But did she have psychosis? No. Was she evil? I think she was. What about Lori Vallow Daybell and little Ty Lee and JJ? Was she psychotic? Probably not, because she's serving a life sentence. So no court declared her, right, insane. But
she didn't even claim it. Yeah, she didn't claim it.
Yeah.
But what about the sympathy factor for these parents who are mothers? Because contrast that to the gentleman, Michael, you mentioned it, I can't remember his name, who literally killed his kids by yes, thank you, Chad, and literally chased down the kids in order to shoot and kill them. And he had all kinds of diagnoses and trauma and experiences. But I think that people are more sympathetic to a mother who does this. Oh, there must have been a mental health issue, versus a father who does this. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Judge, because it's also fact-based that when we look at back to familicide and back to, filicide, a parent killing a child, it is more likely that data shows the husband or the father killing the child rather than the mother. So the sympathy, aspect to this will be very telling. We have Lindsay Clancy in a paralyzed state, waist down. How does that factor into this? It was mentioned earlier in the conversation about how did she actually, leave the window? Was it with trepidation, or was it really with a great deal of, aggression and such? That's another aspect. See, originally with this case, I did think it was a murder-suicide. I thought that the mother wanted to kill the children and then herself, but then I had to hit the pause button also because remember what we all read in some of the early reports, that seemingly her attempt was with a knife, which is a very aggressive type of self-infliction. But recall what was stated, that the injuries via the knife were very superficial, on the wrist area and in the neck area, which then would suggest to me as a criminologist that really wasn't the, prominent decision. And then, Judge, I think you said, did she perhaps go through the window more as if, a staging or an attempt to look as if it was to be suicide? So there's so much to unpack here, a lot of questions for sure.
Oh, and a lot that the jury's going to have to decide. Michael, I'm going to turn it back to you. But first, we have live chat. It's our first time in session with Michael Ayala and Judge Ashley going live. And I have to shout out some of the individuals who have joined us because we have Jeff Wolf. We know Jeff Wolf, criminal defense extraordinaire. So if there are any comments he has, he'll share those with us. I want to welcome my sister, Julie Wilcott. We did Lost Findings. She's a founding member. She's joined us. And I have to introduce Karen Hall. You know her name, Michael. She has been
Yes.
so supportive of
Supportive, yes,
Michael
absolutely.
and of me. We cannot thank you enough, Karen Hall. We're thrilled. I just wanted to do those shout outs if they have questions. We have a Pamela who has joined, one called Marvelous One, love the name. And we're just excited that you all are engaging in the conversation, because one of the biggest issues with mental health, and I've done it for child welfare for years, there are not enough providers. There's not enough opportunity to get help. It is very difficult to fight the system to get the right help for mental health issues. So at the end of all this, no matter what a jury finds, it is tough to get the right mental health treatment that individuals need. That's just my opinion.
No, no
Yes.
question about it. You know, and I definitely want to shout out Karen Hall, Marvelous One, Pamela. You guys have been incredibly supportive, and I see y'all, and I appreciate y'all absolutely. Dr. Goodman, what I wanted to check in on was we're a ways from the defense's case at this point, but I was wondering, with what they're claiming and what we're talking about, can someone in Lindsay Clancy's position testify and be a good witness? What possibly could she tell us? But again, this psychotic break, is it worth her getting up and talking about what she was thinking and feeling? How much could she explain? How much could be coherent?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I anticipated you might ask that. So I went back to take a look again at Andrea Yates. Now, do we think she took the stand or did she not take the stand? Interestingly, as we know, she had 2 trials. She did not take the stand on either trial. So I would anticipate not seeing Lindsay Clancy take the stand. Because again, if we go back to what I like to refer to as the fact patterns, and just very simply the 5 W's and the H for every case, the who, what, when, where, why, and how, you see every case that we discuss and what I discuss in class and what both of you discuss on your podcasts and TV, everybody wants to know the why. So do we even know the why on this one? Would she be able to articulate a why? Because you know what else, Michael and Judge Ashley, there's something in criminology, another theory that I thought potentially might apply here is what we refer to as disposal theory. Now, disposal theory is somebody's mindset where they feel that they just want to get rid of somebody else. You know, we could look at so many cases, whether it's, moms and children or just in general, so many cases through the years we've analyzed and talked about. So I have to wonder out loud, because of what was expressed in the diary, in the journal, did she, with her feelings of being very exhausted, overwhelmed, potentially with mood disorder, maybe hallucinations, remember the hallucination piece, can we actually verify this? That's going to be another big question mark, but we also know with hallucinations, by the way, just for the viewers, that they can be auditory. People claim they hear things, or they could be more visual. They're seeing things. So that has to be looked at. But I'm just wondering out loud with both of you and the viewers, if this disposal theory entered into it where she simply wanted to, I hate to say it in such an abrupt manner, but rid herself of the children, and then potentially she no longer has what may have been viewed as a burden to her.
And that's why I think, and I know Michael and I don't agree on this, when you have a self-defense claim, frequently you're going to hear from the defendant, because they're going to tell what their perception was, why they were in fear for their life. I feel like if a person is going to claim that it was a psychosis or a psychotic break, I believe they should have to testify and tell the jury what they were feeling, what they were experiencing. Because you can't make a defendant testify. We know that. That's their right to choose. They don't have to testify. I just feel like they should have to, because if I'm on the jury, I would want to hear from her about what she was thinking or experiencing, for me to decide whether or not I believe these experts that this is what happened to her.
I would never want to live in the United States of Judge Ashley.
Now, I said they didn't have to.
Some things
It's a
that you
really
said,
great place in my mind. Fair.
You have to testify about your mental health.
I
Yeah,
know,
doctor,
but
I'm
it's
sorry.
really hard to swallow. Here are these experts saying this is what happened, but we're not going to hear from you about how you were actually feeling at the time. That's the way it is. I struggle with it a little bit because she killed 3 young children, her own 3 young children, in a horrible, horrific way. And keep in mind, 2 of them watched one be strangled, and then one watched a second get strangled, right? They were all there in the basement. This is a horrible crime.
It's ugly.
Yes.
Doctor, want to ring in on the idea that testimony should be mandatory in the United States?
Oh, I did not say that, Michael. La la la. Here he goes, putting words in my mouth. I know they don't have to. I'm just saying, I don't think we're going to hear from her, but I wish we would.
No, it's interesting. But then, Michael and Judge Ashley, don't we also take a look at the credibility? So either side of the coin, is she credible? Meaning, if she were to take the stand, the jury still has to look at her as a murderer, an individual who killed 3 little children. That's the one side. But if they look at her with psychosis and potential hallucinations and delusions and a break from reality, is that also going to be viewed as credible? Will they believe her? And then for how long, potentially, assuming she were to say all of this, for how long did she experiencing? Was it a week before, a month before? Was it singularly that 1 hour? All of these things question credibility.
Yeah, I would never. I don't think I would ever want to put someone dealing with this in the firing line of cross-examination. I think that would be very, very difficult. So I don't anticipate seeing her take the stand.
I agree.
Let me ask you a quick question, and I'm sorry, I wanted to ask this because we're going to wrap up this part of the discussion. Selfishly, I want to know, we heard Patrick Clancy testify early on about this idea that she had been telling him that she was having these feelings. She was feeling like hurting the children. I can't imagine as a father how you process that. He still has to get up. He has to do what he has to do. He has to go to work. He has to take care of his family. I don't know if I could ever leave the house again. So my question for you is, what are spouses supposed to do? And deal with what they're seeing? Because again, I'm not clear as to whether this is something of a continuum that you can see it getting worse, or if it just kind of happens. So what is a spouse supposed to do under these circumstances? How do they support someone who's feeling that way?
Right. And therein also lies the challenge, because I speak a lot and I teach at the university about victimology. So in fairness, I do see the husband in this scenario also as a victim. He has lost his 3 precious children. He lost the wife that he knew and married, and he lost really the entirety of the life that he knew. So I think in part there has to be some genuine sympathy and empathy toward this gentleman. But Michael, your question is so heartfelt, because among all of us, we may have a colleague, we may have a friend, even a family member who has grappled with, is potentially, presently grappling with. And by the way, if it's okay, may I also mention, because we may have viewers with understanding of suicide and the magnitude of those issues. So we know there's a national hotline, 988, and there's help. And just again, as a reminder, please, for anybody who's grappling with that. But in terms of family members and spouses, the unconditional love, of course, and the listening, and then the research and the consultation with the medical doctors, with mental health doctors. And sometimes it may be a requisite to literally have a secondary person in the home with the individual. If it's not at the level of hospitalization, but it is at the level of truly concern for one's own, health and well-being, as well as the care, the safety, the survival of somebody else, then maybe a secondary caregiver who could be, whether that means the babysitter, the nanny, or even a family member who's available to also make the provision of care for children.
And take it seriously. All of us can say that. It doesn't matter what you think of a person and if they mean it or don't mean it. If anyone is struggling with mental health or threats of suicide, or please, please, please treat it seriously. So many people need help, and there should not be a stigma with that. There should not be a shame with that. And so if anyone you know is struggling, please give them the number, reach out to them. And Dr. Goodman, I can't say thank you enough. It's always fantastic to see you, but shining a light on all of these issues that experts like yourself, Michael, are going to have to testify in this trial for this jury to make some very hard decisions.
Yeah, this is a battle of the experts for sure. They're expecting this to go on for weeks. And during that middle part, you're going to hear expert after expert after expert from both sides testifying. So we'll certainly be watching. Dr. Goodman, really, I feel smarter. I honestly do. And I'm not saying that. I feel smarter. I feel better equipped to watch the trial and to listen to when those experts take the stand. So I want to thank you again so much for joining us today. Truly, truly appreciate for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us.
Thank you both, Michael, Judge Ashley. Always a pleasure.
We'll see you again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you. I would love to introduce you, and I have covered this. You've done a lot of speaking with your podcast and your pieces about the Nolan Wells case in Mississippi. And I think when it very first happened, both of us felt like there's more to this story. There's more information. And this is the case in which this young man goes to an island where a lot of the kids go to celebrate and have fun. And there's a picture of him on a boat with his 3 friends. They're the 4 of them. And they go to this island and he is left behind. We later know allegedly, right? His body.
One of the big issues is, the narrative that's out there has been adopted, is the one that the boys are telling. A lot of people saying, we know he was on the island, but we're not sure he was left behind. That's one of the issues.
Right. So those words, and that goes directly to my point. Now you have people on both sides, a lot of people speculating, which is what happens. We know at the beginning, it wasn't, in my view, treated as much of an investigation by law enforcement because they suspected he had drowned. And then after that, I think there was enough public pressure. They started to look into it further to do an autopsy. There was alcohol in his body, and the parent, his father, had come out and said, no way. He plays football in college. He's starting training. There's no way that he would have been drinking, but he did have alcohol in his system.
Well, we don't know that either. We don't know that either.
I thought the autopsy said that. Now, why do you say we don't know that?
We don't know any of the results of the autopsy. That information, it came from interviews. So interviews from people on the island who saw Nolan Wells said that he looked like, and they had seen him drinking a lot.
Okay, now this is interesting. I had thought, so I'm not disputing that. I had thought autopsy. Do we know when we expect the autopsy results?
Okay, the autopsy has already been done, but it's being kept under seal because this case is going to the grand jury. So it is not released. Under normal circumstances, the family is entitled to a copy of it once it's done, unless the prosecutor, because it's going to the grand jury, puts a hold on it, which is what they did in this case. So they do not have a copy. Copies have not been publicly distributed as of yet.
Now, what I had understood, and correct me if I'm wrong or if you disagree, I had understood, though, that at the same time, his family, the Wells family, had commissioned an independent autopsy, which is not unusual. And that actually had said that the cause and manner of death at this point in time were ruled undetermined pending investigation. So we know that piece as well.
Absolutely. No, that's absolutely true. I mean, part of the problem with the second private autopsy was, it took place probably maybe almost a week after. And so there was, at least according to the report, significant decomposition. The lungs and the stomach, the 2 things that you need to determine drowning and et cetera, were not included with the body as well. And the throat structure was kept. And I will say that is not uncommon. If it's so, you got chain of custody issues, right? So if one of the key parts of this whole investigation are the lungs and stomach, you don't want to start sending them across country. You know what I mean? Because then you lose chain of custody. So it's understandable they wouldn't do that. The throat, that does happen from time to time in my experience. Not sure why they kept it in this case. It could very well mean that there was something there they wanted to look closer at,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I
Or it could just
automatically
be,
think of strangulation, but that's just me. Go ahead.
it could possibly be, and that's one of the questions of the case, right? Because you might have kept it because maybe it was indicated in some form of drowning. Who knows, right? We don't know. So, right now, as far as the second autopsy wasn't terribly helpful, although they did discover some sort of red coloration in the back of the neck, lower scalp area, which was, they could not explain because there were no lacerations, were no fractures of the skull. So it didn't appear to be something caused by blunt force trauma. But again, more questions than answers, quite frankly.
And I just want to circle back to that alcohol, because then I know we want to talk about alleged defamation suit that might
Yes.
be pursued by one of the families. But the witnesses I know that have been interviewed, to your point, have stated that Nolan Wells had been drinking heavily with friends. That's according to some of the witnesses. And I thought now a toxicology report never said he had alcohol in him, correct? That's what I had seen.
That, as far as I
New
know,
to
and
you.
I've been watching this thing since the very beginning, we don't even have the toxicology report. So
Okay.
apparently, the toxicology report was done
Wow.
after the autopsy was done. They were waiting for the toxicology report, and that hasn't been released as well.
Okay.
So
All right.
we
So
don't have
good.
any
So there's
verification of the fact that he's been drinking. It's been just witness statements that he had been drinking, and it's not a surprise. I had said
Yeah.
in one of my pods that the father had said that he was going off to begin some sort of training program because he was a college football player, and he didn't think his son was drinking. But, who knows, right? The fathers don't know what you're doing on July
right.
4th.
No
And
parents
maybe it was
do.
his last chance to drink, and maybe
Yeah.
he wanted to have a few. Who knows? But again, that doesn't, I don't know what that's indicative of necessarily, except maybe it raises the specter of the possibility of accident. But the thing about this case, Judge, that really gets everybody, and it's
Yeah.
gotten me, it's gotten Nancy Grace, it's gotten Don Lemon, all these folks who are interested in it, is if you look at pictures of the island, it's like this small little sort of barrier island kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And with all those people out there, it's hard to imagine no one has seen or no one saw what had happened to this young man. That's the part that has everybody sort of in this weird space looking for reasons as to what happened here. We have no idea, but that's what's raised the problems.
But I agree, that's raised the problems. But I have to say this is an area, again, where these kids all go and congregate and drink
Yeah.
and party and have fun. These kids are teenagers with their little teenage brains. And I don't mean that as judgmental. I mean it as factual, that their brains are not fully developed, and reports that this is where individuals go to drink. And so if you have drinking teenagers partying, having fun, there may be a good bit of them that don't pay attention to or realize what's happened to a particular kid. Now, I think someone may have, but in general, it may not surprise me that you're going to have kids there that say either A, they didn't see him, or B, have no idea what happened to him.
No, I would agree 100%. And, it's not fair to say everyone on the island was drinking or drunk at that point, but it's
Yeah.
fair to say that, you lose sight of a person, right? The person, the story is he stayed on the island because there was a girl he wanted to hang out with, and the guys had to go back on the boat because they were taking on water for some reason.
Mhm.
And they needed to go back because they were worried about that. He didn't want to go back. He was checking this girl, decided to stay with her. The girl says at some point he left her. The United Cajun Navy just released their investigation and the results of their investigation. And they said the critical time is from about 3:15 or 3:20, can't remember the exact time, but in that range, to 4:31, when we know the boat left to get back out, right? Away from that island area. And they're saying that's the critical space because the last time she saw him, or anyone saw him, was that 3:21, 3:15 to 20 area. And he said he was going back to the boat to catch a ride. And they left at 4:31. So from that 3:15 to 4:30 area, that's the critical area. No one saw Nolan Wells.
Right.
So it's very possible something happened. I mean, clearly something happened in that space, provided we believe he never got back on the boat, and no one saw.
Well, allegedly, no one saw him, right? I don't believe
Mhm.
that. I think somebody did, but I don't think that information has been learned in the course of the investigation. So here's what happens in a case like this, in many, many cases, and that's speculation in the court of public opinion, where people start saying, oh, those three boys on the boat. Let's talk about that picture, Michael. One of them does not look like the others, and that one of them is Nolan Wells. He appears to be African American in his skin color. The other three appear to be Caucasian in skin color, and there's a lot of speculation about something happened to him, and these boys did something to him. And there's a 911 call that's been released when they are taking on water, or they're specifically calling for help with their boat. There's some arguably concerning language in that 911 tape that sounds like they're saying something that may ominous have happened to him. So you put all this together and people are speculating and they start talking. And so one of the boys' families, it's the Edmistons, if I'm saying that correctly, are threatening a defamation lawsuit because they're saying people are
All the
fabricating.
families are, Judge. All the
Are they
families
all
are
on
now.
it now? All
All
right, because
are.
they
Yep, they all
started.
are.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it started
Because
with the Edmiston family, but now they all are planning, or say they're planning to sue on Ben Crump for defamation.
and the part that sticks out to me is they're saying the problem is people are fabricating these assertions of fact that are putting their families in danger. Speak to that part and what you thought when
Yeah.
you heard defamation.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt, because arrests have been made already, that all the families have come under deadly threats
Mhm.
as a result of what's happened here. And, people have been very ugly about this case. They lawyered up very quickly. Again, and you and I have talked about this. We don't disparage anyone for lawyering
Mm-mm.
up. Dealing with
Mm-mm.
the system is tough, and you get a lawyer, no problem at all. I don't see that as them admitting any kind of guilt or anything. That's what you do. You got to
Agreed.
protect yourself under these circumstances.
That's what
So
I would do.
I
That's what
just,
you would do.
that's what I would do, and would tell my children, friends, anybody to do. Call Jeff Wolf.
Yes.
But
Who
but
is in Colorado? Jeff
who
Wolf's
is in Colorado? Yes,
Yes.
he is in fact in
Perfect.
Colorado. He's a buff. But so I'm not saying that disparagingly. But at the end of the day, they have been suffering because of this. They took down their social media, it just got
Mhm.
crazy. And so they're saying the reason that they're coming under fire this way is because of speculation. Now, defamation goes beyond speculation. You have to make claims that someone did something that is absolutely not true, and as a result, they suffer some sort of damage within the public sphere. And they're saying specifically Ben Crump has made statements that have done this, that have made accusations that are not true, but also, and I found this interesting, and I had to look this one up, he was reposting what other people were saying in terms of alleging that they did something. Not only alleging, but actually saying that they were responsible. So Bart Edmiston, for instance, everybody for a time was saying, because this girl that Nolan was staying on the island to see used to be his girlfriend,
Mhm.
he was the one responsible for
Mhm.
killing him because he was jealous, et cetera, and there was some argument or what have you. So that's sort of the basis of their defamation suit.
And, I understand why they're upset. I understand why they're saying that, but it becomes that issue of when is it social media and the world we live in and public opinion and speculation versus true grounds for a defamation lawsuit that they know what they're saying is false. And it's why, let's be honest, it's why we have to say allegedly, right? He was allegedly killed. Nobody knows that he was killed. And if that were the fact, then until there's a trial and they've been convicted, someone allegedly murdered someone else. And so the language makes a real difference. And Ben Crump is an exceedingly smart lawyer. He knows, in my opinion, what language is appropriate to use and not appropriate to use. So do you think the defamation grounds could stick?
I can't really speak to it because I don't know all of the things that he said. I don't know all of the things that he's reposted. So I can't say. Certainly, as I said, if he has reposted some other person saying it, because again, Ben Crump's not the one at the keyboard putting that stuff out. He's got social media folks doing that.
Yes.
So they might have made that mistake. And so he'll have to deal with that under those auspices. But I agree with you. What he's done in the times that I've heard him speak is specifically say, we're not accusing anyone of anything.
Yes,
We just
exactly.
want the truth. Whoever it acquits, whoever it convicts. That's kind of his little saying, trying to do his little Johnny Cochran thing. And so he's been clear to say that, but that doesn't clear you. Just giving a caveat, that doesn't clear you. If you're saying the wrong things, you're accusing people wrongly, and you haven't made the right strides to find the truth, you negligently didn't find the truth or recklessly failed to find or discover the truth, then I think you're liable. There could be, I just want to say quickly what he has said in response to this. He said it's just a distraction. It's interesting that these threats started to come up after they started sending notices to the families of possibility of a civil suit. So they sent them letters of preservation saying, I want you to preserve your phones, all kinds of information, because there may be a civil suit in this case. And suddenly we started hearing these sort of counterclaims for possibly defamation. So he noted that as well. And that it's very possible that they're sort of playing these sort of games.
Right. No, that is. And all of this, the worst part is, I think some of this could have been, not the worst part. The worst part is you have a dead person who shouldn't be, but put that aside. The fact that this was not treated as an investigation from the very beginning with very clear communication, for instance, this is an active investigation. We cannot provide a lot of answers, but we are taking this seriously and we are doing an autopsy and given the public more of a guide, a map of this is what we're doing. I think it would have quelled some of the speculation. I think some of this starts because it's not treated as an investigation in the public's mind, and that's problematic.
Yeah, again, I don't know how this was treated from the very beginning, and that's part of the problem, right? And part of the reason that this has become an issue is because less than an hour after finding the body, the lead investigator comes out and says this is an accidental drowning with no signs of foul play. And people are like, how could you know that? Did you get the ME down to look? The ME can barely tell this and make that determination. You made it just by looking at the body. Again, he may have looked at it and saw there were no signs of physical struggle or injuries, and from doing some interviews around the scene, come up to that conclusion, but you should not have said that publicly. And when the DA finally came out and said something to the public, she said he was in error. He should not have said that. So she did say that. But I don't know how that might have affected that initial investigation. We've talked about this. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to collect evidence from the body, protect the scene, not let people on, all those things so you can get evidence. And we don't know if that was done or not, right?
Yeah,
we don't know, even though he felt it was an accidental drowning, if he treated it like a suspicious death. And that was one of the big questions early on. Because if you're going to take this to the grand jury and they did not treat it the way it was supposed to be treated in the beginning as a serious investigation, then the information going to the grand jury is only going to be as good as your initial investigation.
Exactly. And who knows what that will or won't include. And I will say the other reality is it could have been a drowning. The point is nobody knows, Michael. Nobody knows, which is why you take it to a grand jury. That's a private, confidential proceeding for the prosecution. It's one-sided, according to a lot of defense attorneys. I wish Jeff could jump in with you because a lot feel like it's archaic and should not continue as grand jury. But the prosecution is the one who gets to present the information to the grand jury for the grand jury to determine whether or not they will indict anyone for the alleged crimes. So there's a lot still coming out of this case.
Yeah, I just want to talk briefly about the grand jury because grand juries are problematic on so many levels. It seems, and I was shocked to hear her say this, that any case in that jurisdiction that's a non-criminal, that's not a non-criminal car crash or a natural death that was declared a natural death goes to the grand jury. And I was shocked by that. And I don't understand why that would be the case. But I think part of it is, these smaller jurisdictions get so used to doing things their own way. And this is sort of a shield for prosecutors because, quite frankly, folks need to know prosecutors have all the power. They're the only ones in there. They're presenting. There's not even a judge in there. So they can present whatever evidence they want. And there's an old saying, you can indict a ham sandwich, or you cannot indict one as well, depending on what evidence you decide to present to the jury. So how do they present this, Judge? Do they present evidence of some of the contradictions? And let's say the kids told stories that they were doing one thing. So there's a big thing online now when you look at the timeline, and one of the interviews done by the young men suggests they were doing one thing. The timeline shows that they were doing something else. So at one point they took the boat and the boat went to a home and then it went back to another home, and people are wondering what was going on. He doesn't really quite mention that. So do you present that as the possibility of an obstruction of justice charge, that he was lying about it? This tape you were talking about, they split the tracks and found that people were talking about, hey, is he dead? Nolan, wake up. Oh my God. This really sort of, Sabruder tape type stuff that blew my mind, but we don't know if it's authentic or not. The woman swears that she didn't do anything to the tape. I don't know. Everybody's got their experts looking at it. The state has it. Ben Crump's got his own experts, so we'll find out. How do they?
You know what I think they're going to do, Michael, and you froze for just a minute. It may just be on my end. You're still frozen. I don't know if you can hear me or not. Somebody type in the chat if you've lost. Oh, good. There you are. You froze for just a minute, but it may have been on my end. Michael, I think here's what I would expect. First of all, I think that the reason in that small community they give everything to the grand jury is to protect the office of the prosecutor, so that they can say the public's involved in terms of the grand jury process and they're deciding who indict, not me. I'm not being subjective. It's going through the system. But number two, I think in this case, I would expect that the prosecutor would present every bit of evidence possible to argue circumstantial case of murder. I think there's some lesser crimes like the interference with the law investigation. I think, though, that they're going to go for big charges. I do. And I think they're going to try to build up everything you've mentioned to say all the circumstantial evidence means that they had to have done it, that there's no other reasonable explanation for their actions and what they said and what they did and what was on the 911 tape, that the reasonable conclusion is that some of those boys did it, or whoever else was around him that we haven't heard about yet, that somebody did it. I think that's what's going to happen.
Look,
I do.
They may judge, but there's not enough evidence. Even
Not
with
yet.
the tape, there's not enough evidence for murder, right? So
Not
we've
yet.
seen so many times in these kind of cases where you begin with the lower level crimes. Look at Alec Murdaugh. They first got him on lying about because of his financial issues. And then it sort of bubbled. Michelle Troconis, I don't know if you remember that case, right? I believe it was out of Connecticut, where she was having an affair and was involved in helping the husband kill the wife. And initially they charged her with lying to police because she said she wasn't doing something. They had her on tape doing it. And they started there. And that's how they ended up. I think if you're going to get to the bottom of this case, that's how it's going to have to go. I don't think there's going to be enough evidence anywhere for them to actually prove that somebody did something to him. But if they authenticate that tape, they know something happened. They're going to have to start arresting people on these lesser charges and see who falls first. And then get somebody to say, oh my God, I don't want to go to prison. I'm telling on so-and-so, or I'm telling on so-and-so. That's the way. Again, I want to reiterate, if something happened here, this could very well be an accidental drowning.
Oh, absolutely.
So I just want to let people know we're not implicating anyone.
No,
I don't want to be involved in any defamation suits.
No, and we have no idea what happened.
If it's, we're looking at the discrepancies that have been pointed out.
And to your point, if we were to look at the evidence that we have been told through media is actual evidence collected, you and I would chime in if we felt like that's enough evidence, they're going to do it. Both of us agree there's not enough evidence to say what happened to him, not that we're aware of at this point in time. I don't think anyone can say this is what happened. And that
we don't know.
That's what makes it hard.
Statement out from someone who gives them something more. But from everything we've seen, I haven't seen anything. I've seen discrepancies. Absolute discrepancies, but what they do with those discrepancies and what they amount to, I don't know. I can't really say at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. All right, take us where we're going next.
I've been fascinated with Courtney Clenny from the very beginning.
Yeah, you have, but why? I'm not a huge fan.
It's interesting because I just thought it was this. Okay. Let me clarify. I've been interested in it from a legal standpoint. I thought it presented some very interesting issues because I think this was a absolutely toxic relationship.
Yes.
From all we started to learn, they both were abusive to each other.
Yes.
And she ended up being charged with murder. She did some things after the murder. She called her mother before calling police, talked with her for a while. She actually was found forensically. She said she threw the knife at him and it ended up causing the wound that killed him. Forensically, it's been shown, or at least allegedly shown, that it could not have happened that way. So she lied about that as well. So she ended up being charged with second-degree murder. And I thought it created an interesting sort of dichotomy because you have a white woman, a black man. You have two people involved in OnlyFans where they basically were making a living doing things on OnlyFans. Most of you know what goes on OnlyFans. So I don't know how sympathetic she would have been under the circumstances. They both had a history. And there was a fight going on as to just how much of that domestic violence history could come in. So I thought it made for an interesting trial.
And we know, Marvelous One just said, is she the OnlyFans chick? She sure is. And we know there was a domestic violence incident that was occurring in their penthouse. And there's video of them on an elevator that's been shown and you can find on social media easily. She was charged with a second-degree murder. Her defense continued to argue it was self-defense, right? That was her position is, yes, this happened.
Battered, I don't say wife, but battered woman syndrome.
Partner syndrome, right. Yes. And that it was self-defense. Now, the prosecution was claiming the forensic evidence would disprove that, right? They were saying that there was a downward stabbing motion with the knife by the defendant, Courtney Clenny, and therefore that it would not be self-defense, or they could show that it wasn't self-defense. So this is what's going into all of this. And I remember thinking, I think the only part that made it interesting to me was, wow, this is really one where it's coming down to a jury to have to determine the facts, because I could have seen it either way based on the elevator piece of video on them on the elevator, based on everything you read and heard and what the evidence expected to be. It was a clear domestic violence relationship, right? I think that was undisputed. And
it turns out that elevator video, the judge had ruled that was going to come in at trial. So that may have been some of the impetus for the defense to try to work something out. But let me give you an example. So you have the elevator video. They also have another incident in Las Vegas where she abused him and was arrested for that.
There
were the audio, I don't know if you remember this, audio and text messages of her using racial slurs, her calling him names, verbal abuse, and building security reports in the building they lived in, where she was in trouble for yelling, screaming, hitting him in the lobby.
And I don't think anyone argues against that. I think that that's true factually. She was the aggressor in those different circumstances.
Absolutely. And then, so what was supposed to happen on Friday of last week, well, Thursday and Friday of last week, our own Marie Pereira was there. She was disappointed that Clenny didn't show up, and the security guard told her she's not coming tomorrow either. We weren't sure what was going on. Turns out late Friday we found out there was a plea, but they were in a reverse Williams hearing, and basically that's to see if the defense could get in stuff about Abumseli, the victim in this case, to support this battered partner syndrome. They were going to bring in medical records of her getting stitches and a dislocated shoulder. Texts where she was claiming and talking about the fact that he had hit her and beat her. There was going to be a neighbor that was going to testify that he saw him attack her in the lobby of their building. And so there was plenty to work with on both sides. So, both sides had this impetus to say, okay, can we work out a deal? So let's talk about what we think the deal might be. Second-degree murder in Florida, minimum baseline of 20 years. The judge is actually not allowed to go lower unless there's evidence presented of mitigating factors, one of which could be the other person was an aggressor, or you were involved in some sort of sudden type passion situation, which can take away the depraved mind part and make it a manslaughter case. So I think that's probably where they landed.
I think you're right. Now, keep in mind, she's been in jail since August of 2022. So 4 years, she's already been in jail. Certainly that's time served. So you take that off of a 20-year if that's what she gets. But I think we're going to expect the defense to, in the sentencing piece, I think the evidence that the defense has about his role in the relationship in the past benefits her.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think it may have played a part, again, in perhaps allowing them to agree to go from a second-degree murder, depraved mind murder, not premeditated, depraved mind. You take the fact that the person could have been involved in a situation where they were fighting back, or the person was involved in this sudden passion type situation, or the other person was a provocateur. You can then reduce it to that manslaughter. But what's interesting, I want to point out, the attorney for the Abumseli family, the victim's family,
Yes.
released a statement once
Yes.
it came out. And I want to say what he said, which I think tells us something. He said that the Courtney Clenny, the OnlyFans of the girl who's on trial, the state and the family, the Abumseli family, have reached a resolution. So everybody was involved. And then he says, pleading guilty and accepting full responsibility will begin the process of closure. That tells me when he says accepting full responsibility, I'm not sure they're talking about manslaughter. Maybe she's going to accept full responsibility for a second-degree murder and then use some of these factors to perhaps try to mitigate that 20 down to maybe 15 manslaughter level.
Why would she agree to second-degree murder under these circumstances with the facts that the defense has? I can't imagine why, unless they also agreed to a potential sentence that they expect the judge would accept. And one of the things that's really important for viewers and listeners to remember is if you practice in these courts, you know the disposition of the judge. So you know if a judge is likely to accept a plea agreement, to accept an agreed to sentence or not. And so that really makes a difference in where you go with the plea agreement, in my opinion, as a practicing attorney. Someone asked, and I just shared, August 10th is when the plea agreement will be read in court. August 10th, that's when we're going to know all the details. But I too noted there was
and the
discussion
judge has
about,
to accept it, Judge.
Yes.
So it's as a
Yes.
plea, a negotiated plea.
Yes.
The judge still has to accept it. So it's
Right.
not official yet.
Right. And it really does say a lot to me as well that this defense attorney for the victim's family has said it accepts accountability. It's accountability by her, Courtney Clenny. And I too noticed that language and said, wait a minute. If it's showing accountability by her, it's saying she's responsible for intentionally doing it in my mind, but we'll see. We have to wait and
that's
see.
what it's saying to me too, which is why I'm saying maybe she pleads to that. The only question I have for the defense here is they were getting ready to do that reverse Williams hearing to see how much about Abumseli's violent past they could get in. Why not wait till after that hearing, right? Wait to see how the judge rules before you make a plea. So again, when I factor in that they did it before the reverse Williams hearing, this deal has to have been something that was negotiated, both parties feeling a little pain. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, the state had to be a little worried about this case. The optics certainly were not in their favor, but they certainly had a lot to work with. Same thing for the defense. And so I feel like it's probably fallen in a little bit below that second-degree murder. Came in with the manslaughter where she admits to killing him, admits that they were fighting, and maybe she took that knife and did stick it in him, which is what she shouldn't have done, and it's certainly a crime. And in Florida, that would put her somewhere between 9.5 and 15.
Yeah.
And like you said, she's been in jail 4. The minimum will be 9.5. So let's say she starts there. She's got another 5 to do. It's not the worst deal in the world. And if the family agreed, I don't know.
I think it's a great deal for her if that's the deal.
Her, yeah.
Because going to trial is such a risk. And, some of the people have commented they don't trust her. A lot of people don't like her. If you just read court of public opinion, and if the jury also didn't like her, you got to take that into account when you're planning to go forward with trial or enter a plea. So August 10th.
I think you're with me. You would have liked this trial too. So this is what I'm talking about. There were all these factors.
Yeah, I don't like her.
She's not the most likable person. You got all these other things going on. I just thought it would have been an interesting trial.
You are right. I think it would have been interesting. All right, listen, Michael, I know people are having to jump off, but I want to get to Family Corner because I really, really, really need your male husband perspective, not my husband, but somebody else's husband. Because, okay, so Michael, you knew when we were on set together every single day that I may or may not enjoy a late night perusing of what the current fashion trends are. And I will admit I like clothes, and especially if you're on air every day, you need different clothes. But I always find good sales. I'm really great about finding really good sales or finding things that I really like that you can find on Instagram, for instance, that aren't that expensive. So in my mind, I need it for work. I know that's relative, not a third world problem, but I enjoy buying these new clothes. And generally I have to comment, you like clothes and you like fashion and you like, and generally you liked what I wore. It was only a rarity that you might say, I'm not really sure that look is a good look for you. But here's my question. Do you, when you're married, have a rule with you and your wife, Colleen? Do you have a rule that if you spend over a certain amount, you clear it with her as your spouse before you do it?
First of all, let me just say, yes, I love fashion. I grew up with women and I had sisters and mom. And so I've always been into it. And I used to enjoy because you'd love to shop and you'd always sort of, consult with me. And I enjoyed all of that. But you were absolutely an addict. Okay. And you said it, like, I only bought the sales, that just sounds like it. But you love to buy
Sounds
stuff,
like an
and that's
addict. All
fine.
right, fair.
So I feel your husband's pain. But yes, there are. So for instance, there's a mutual respect. And I think part of this is, you got to kind of know who you marry. We are not going to spend large amounts without mentioning it to the other person. Like I don't think it's ever happened in maybe once where you go on the credit card and you're like, holy cow, where did that come from? You know what I mean? We always sort of give a heads up. Hey, I'm doing this. And it may not be even, because my wife won't ask. She's basically just telling me, I'm going on a trip with the girls. There's going to be about 3,000 on the card. Deal with it. You know what I mean? So that's just kind of the way it goes. But it's responsible. And generally we're in a position where we know that we can handle it. We hate carrying credit card balances and stuff. So,
same.
there's this good sort of, understanding as far as that goes for us. But I think there has to be an understanding. Otherwise, it can become problematic.
And I think, so the hard part for me is I agree with big purchases. Like we have never done a big trip or a car or a motorcycle or even an electric bike without consulting the other, right? Karen Hall says there's help for that, Judge Ashley. I know, get off my phone and stop spending money. But you know what I started thinking is, to me, I'm always transparent. Like I show him what I get, and he loves fashion and clothes. So I say, does this look good? Does this not look good? Can I wear this on air? Is this something I need to return? And he loves shopping with me. So to me, Michael, I'm like, well, I'm transparent. He knows I'm getting, and he knows it's coming in. But the other night, all I could think was, but is it unfair because I don't really look at the whole number as a whole. And I don't really say, okay, what's our budget for clothes?
Yeah. And that's something that I certainly will talk to my wife about. So if I think things are getting out of hand, she, and what's interesting, every couple of years we both go on shopping sprees, right? We just need new stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, she'll let me know that that's happening. I'll kind of let her know that's happening. But if there's in between, there's just stuff popping up, $300 here, $400 there. Like, and I'll nicely, very nicely, and maybe with something protecting me, go and say, hey, honey, what's this? What's going on?
With your shield, in case
with
she
my
throws
shield,
something at you.
And I'm like, hey, honey, I'm noticing what's going on with this, and the point will be taken. Like it may not even be discussed because she's like, I'm a grown woman. Don't be messing with me. I make my own money.
Work,
but the point will be made. So I will make, a point of that if I'm seeing it getting a little out of hand. But because I know she's been pretty much responsible through our whole marriage, it's not that big of a deal. If she's doing it, it's because she really feels like she wants to do it. And who am I to tell her not to do it?
I love you as a husband because that's my husband too. But sometimes I think it can let us get out of control without realizing. So the good news of all of this, that I've been homebound for a couple of weeks. And the good news of that is I said, you know what? We're going to approach it a little differently. I'm going to finally kind of say, what's the budget for it? And have fun shopping, but have my husband help me say, we're not going to spend more than this amount.
Yeah. So, and I think, you know what? It's interesting. The person you are and the way I watched you shop, how much you love sales and stuff, you might have fun with that.
Yeah.
It might be fun saying, how much can I get within my limit?
That is me. You have nailed it, Michael, because that's it. If I can get a good deal, I buy something because I'm like, I can't believe I got this good of a deal. So you are right. So that's the latest Family Corner. Love having you in for it. Here's what Karen says. My last thought, like my girl J-Lo says, I got my own money. There you go.
Yes.
All right. This has been so
God
much
bless
fun
the
to do
woman who
live.
has her own money.
Yes.
And folks, passports are being given to the United States of Judge Ashley Wilcott. If you want to go live there, it's not for the faint
Be
of heart.
careful. It's not for the faint of heart.
Seriously, it's not for the faint of heart.
But you'll
All right.
look good because you'll have really
Yeah.
great clothes.
Really great clothes, right? It's like the fashion capital. All right, darling. It was great. Truly
Yeah.
appreciate being with you. I enjoyed
Me
our
too.
conversation. I hope folks enjoyed it too. Again, thank you all for supporting us on
Yeah.
this. I think we got to discuss what we want to do. I love the live. I really enjoyed this. I thought this was fun. So we'll see if we'll do a lot more of these. I really enjoyed it. All
I
right.
do too. And I love the live
Folks,
commentary. Thank you
have a
guys for
great
joining.
one. This has been In Session, and court is now adjourned.